Right now, the government of Iran is being slaughtered. I mean, the highest up officials in Iran are being destroyed by Israel. What makes this situation interesting, though, is that really by all metrics, this attack by Israel is not defensive. It's not. I've seen them claim that is preemptive, but it's really not preemptive either. Because what is a preemptive strike? What is a preemptive strike? A preemptive strike is whenever somebody's about to shoot you, but then you shoot them instead, right? And so the Israelis talk about these stories of like the 7-Day War, or in the past where Arab powers around them have been planning on invading, and then they've blown up all their tanks just as they were lining up to invade Israel. That's something that you could consider a preemptive strike. What is not a preemptive strike is going to a country because they might develop a weapon, or maybe they're in the process of developing just a weapon, not necessarily one that's about to be used against you. Attacking them for that reason, that's not a preemptive strike. That's just an attack. Now, you can say, well, I support the attack because Iran is a terrible regime which has sponsored terrorism around the Middle East. That's true. The Iranian regime is a pretty terrible regime. You don't have to tell me twice that they're a terrible regime. I think if you tell any Iranian that's outside of Iran, they'll enthusiastically agree with you that it's a terrible regime. And they have sponsored terrorism around the Middle East, in Yemen, in Lebanon, in Syria with Bashar al-Assad previously. They've been the biggest backers of Hezbollah. They've been the biggest backers of Hamas. So they are terrible. But I do find it interesting that the justification for attacking them is that they might get a nuclear weapon whenever we know that Israel does have nukes itself. It might deny that it has nukes, but it does have nukes. And so I find that interesting. Now, there's a separate question about whether the United States will be involved. So none of Trump's tweets actually come from Trump's account anymore. Trump tweets exclusively, seemingly, through JD Vance, where JD Vance screenshots his Truth Social post. But here's the statement. I gave Iran chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest of words to just do it. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told, that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world by far, and that Israel has a lot of it with much more to come. It's true. F-35s is what Israel has used, and that's how they've been able to decimate the Iranian regime. They flew their jets in there, and they weren't shot down. Iran couldn't do anything to F-35s. They can't even see them. So that's true. And they know how to use it. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They are all dead now, and it will only get worse. There's already been great death and destruction, but there's still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there's nothing left and save what once was known as the Iranian Empire. I don't think that it was ever known as that. Maybe I'm just a bad Iranian. This is the Persian Empire. That's what it was known as. Iran is more of a modern name for the country. I don't believe it was ever named the Iranian Empire. Could be wrong about that. But why not? No more death, no more destruction. Just do it before it's too late. God bless you all. So what I find so interesting about this statement is it's really different from what we were hearing about from the White House just yesterday. And what do I mean by that? Marco Rubio released a statement right after Israel started going after Iran. They started bombing them. And he said, tonight Israel took unilateral action against Iran. We are not involved in strikes against Iran, and our top priority is protecting American forces in the region. Israel advised us that they believe this action was necessary for its self-defense. President Trump and the administration have taken all necessary steps to protect our forces and remain in close contact with our regional partners. Let me be clear, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel. So this is very different from what Trump said. Trump said they left me no choice. Whenever you listen to what Trump says, it really sounds like Trump called Netanyahu and he says, bomb those sons of bitches. Bomb the hell out of these guys. But Rubio, yesterday, before I guess the memo went out, that actually this is all part of Trump's plan, said actually this wasn't us. And if you ask me who I believe Rubio. I think that Israel decided to do this in the midst of Trump's negotiations with Iran. If y'all remember, he was talking about working on a new nuclear deal with Iran. He was talking about how amazing it was going to be. It was going to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon, which I think is interesting because we already had a nuclear deal until they got rid of it. Then Israel starts bombing Iran like there's no tomorrow. But of course, Trump can't admit that this is a decision they made without him. This is a decision that they actually might have made to subvert his negotiations and try to force his hand into supporting them in a war with Iran. No, he has to say, actually, it was my plan all along, which is kind of funny. It's funny if it didn't have such high stakes. It also means if that is the case, Israel really played their cards correctly because they knew that basically whatever they did, Trump would have to claim credit for because, he can't look like he's not controlling Israel. So there's some MAGA influencers that are upset about this. You're seeing different lines from these people. So there's this guy, Tucker Carlson. Have you ever heard of Tucker? He just made a video on what topic? How to save the United States from getting sucked into an utterly catastrophic war with Iran and Russia. Unfortunately, Tucker, your video came out too late. Trump didn't get a chance to watch it. It's too late. We're already getting sucked into a war with Iran. But of course, Iran is actually striking back. And they're striking back pretty heavily. I think some people have been surprised by that. It's being blasted out by the Iran military Twitter. And I think this is another interesting thing. We live in an age where everyone is so terminally online. The governments themselves have their own online accounts, and they understand that actually part of the way they wage their PR war is just to have witty tweets. And so there's a tweet that went really viral today. Let's see. Of course, they've been tweeting a lot, which kind of makes sense given the context. We've arrived. That's crazy to me. Just imagine you took somebody from 20 years ago and you show them this image that the Iran military is just hopping on their Twitter account, like they're having their social media guy. He's just cooking this shit up. He's like, oh, we got some pictures from the front. We got this apartment building we just blew up. He's like, I got it. I know exactly what I'm going to say. I got this cooked up. We got the whole team working on this. And the people that work for the government in Iran, I imagine at such a senior level, you're running their social media accounts. These guys are radical jihadists. I mean, these guys are radical Muslims. So some terminally online radical Muslims are writing these tweets. And Twitter thinks they're bangers. 513,000 likes on that. I mean, look at this. Khamenei himself. Now, who knows? Do we think Khamenei actually writes his own tweets? I don't know. If he does, I think it's crazy if he does. I think it's also, clearly he has to be involved because so many people see these. But he says, today we must give a strong response to the evil, despicable, terrorist Zionist entity, God willing. We will respond with strength and will show no mercy to them. The funny thing about Khamenei's tweets, and just in general, Iran's tweets, is that often they'll have the most intense response, we will destroy you. you're going to be obliterated, death to Israel. And then like half of their leaders will just get killed like the next day or like the same day, just utterly obliterated. And this is what happens. Like, this is what happens when you're fighting a modern war with old technology. Iran can't defend itself from ballistic missile attacks and certainly can't defend itself from modern fighters because all of their anti-aircraft weapons that are still around are from like the 70s and 80s. Their new stuff has already been blown up. So, like, they really can't do that much. Now, what they can do is they can pummel Israel. And you're seeing that, like here. Tel Aviv is getting blown to bits. But if any country can shoot these missiles down, it's Israel because of the Iron Dome. But you can't shoot every single one down. You know how hard it is to hit a missile with a missile? I don't. I'm a law student. I have no idea. But I imagine it's really hard. And so that's probably why some of these buildings are being hit. But back to the previous question of what do we think this does to MAGA, right? Because there's clearly two factions in MAGA. To give you one example of one of the factions, we have Mr. Mike Johnson. Mike is a traditional Christian conservative Tea Party guy. And so, like traditional Tea Party guys, evangelicals, praying for Israel and its people, America stands with you. 100% behind Israel. This actually reminds me of another tweet by Mr. Fetterman, who is, I think, like one of the more Zionist, more pro-Israel members of the Democratic Party. I actually responded to this tweet. He said, our commitment to Israel must be absolute, and I fully support this attack. This is the orthodoxy for a lot of like the mainstream Republicans and some of the center Democrats. But then you can tell that the base of the party has shifted. If you talk to Republicans, a lot of them are anti-foreign intervention. They've been hearing about how terrible it is that we're giving weapons to Ukraine. They're really not that much. They don't have as much of an ideological commitment to Israel as evangelicals traditionally have, because a lot of them are really not religious evangelicals that are part of the MAGA movement. And I think one of the things that indicates this is not just that there's people on the far right, like the Hodge twins, which don't like it. It's not just that Tucker Carlson specifically doesn't like it or Candace Owens. There's people like Charlie Kirk. I think Charlie Kirk, unfortunately, represents pretty much the mainstream of MAGA, which is now mainstream. And he's talking about what's going on in Israel a lot. Of course, he's posting stuff, I think, about his wife. Let's see. Charlie Kirk says, young Trump supporters do not support America getting offensively involved in Israel's war with Iran. Israel's war with Iran. This is language which is not normal of the traditional Republican Party. And he's right. Yes, many of them are not so enthusiastic about supporting another war in the Middle East after they've been used to us, whining about wars in the Middle East for about like 20 years. I mean, their entire life they've been hearing about how terrible it is. People all across the political spectrum. And so Charlie has been saying, well, we should be restrained. Yeah, so it seems like the median position of like the centrist path of MAGA is Trump basically just says, I support what Israel's doing and doesn't do very much to support them other than fund their military, which is like, what we've been doing for a long time. Then there's another outcome where Iran strikes the United States assets. And they've actually said they want to do that. And it's like, okay, if they strike a U.S. military base, what do we think Trump does? I really have no idea. I'm not going to pretend to have a take on that because I genuinely have no idea what he would do. Part of me thinks, he'll strike them really, really hard. But another part of me thinks he doesn't really want the smoke. I mean, let's think about Trump's military entanglements previously. What was the biggest thing that he did, like war-wise? I mean, he continued the drone strikes in Yemen. I guess it was something we were already doing. Maybe he enhanced those. That was the intervention we already had. He killed Soleimani. That's like the most aggressive thing he's done. And I think he did that because he was surrounded by like John Bolton and a bunch of hot guys who said you should definitely do that. Now he's surrounded by like Stephen Miller and a bunch of like Dove guys. Do I think that he wants to? But then again, there's a lot of turbo Zionists in his administration. We'll see. I don't think the U.S. gets super dragged into it. But I think that Trump will continue to support Israel on this. And this will be interesting. It's sad. It's sad that a lot of people are dying. If you ask me what my hope is, the long run, I hope that the Iranian regime gets destabilized. The worst thing that could happen is Israel makes the Iranian people like the government there. And this is something that people don't know. Iranian people hate their government. It's like part of their personality. All the Iranians, they love the United States. If you go to Iran and you speak English, they'll love you. They think it's amazing. They all want to leave. They all want to come to America. They're not able to come to America anymore because Trump has a travel ban on Iran, which is the case. A lot of people don't know that. But yes, there's a travel ban on Iran. So he's actually made that not possible to do. But they love the United States. They hate their government because the government sucks. Their lives are worse. A lot of them miss the time before the revolution. Of course, there was a monarchy back then that was imperfect. But a lot of them look fondly back, nostalgically, over those years because Iran was much more relatively wealthy. It was the wealthiest country in the Middle East or close to it. It was a world power. It was aligned with the West. It had a lot of relevancy and pride. It was much more secular. So a lot of Iranians are not really strong Muslims. So back then, you could party more. Women didn't have to wear the hijab. A lot of people miss those days. But what we've seen in the past is whenever Israel has attacked Iran and the United States has supported it, like when Soleimani was killed, a lot of Iranians came out to support the government against the other side. That is a way you could turn people in favor of the government because you're bombing them, you're killing them. If they're going to choose, what are they going to choose? The Israelis, which are always shooting at them, the United States to a lesser extent, which is helping shoot at them, or are they going to choose their own government? Well, some of them are going to choose their government. The government's going to have tons of propaganda about these things. But if strikes stay targeted and they're able to take out senior Iranian leadership like Khamenei, you could see a situation where the government is significantly weakened and divided because there's not such a clear line of succession. And out of that, one can hope that the people can manage to have an uprising. Of course, it's challenging because there's no like real Iranian like revolutionary party, obviously, right? That's in the country. And the political parties in Iran are kind of fake. So how would they even have structure? In Iran, there's a religious military force, which is quite substantial. And then there's the secular military. And there's divisions between the like elected parts of government and the theocratic parts of government. And we can imagine some sort of civil war between these two groups. But it's not clear that you get democracy out of either of these sides. Perhaps if the military takes out the theocrats and now we have like a military dictatorship, that could actually become a democracy slowly over time. If you ask me, probably most realistically, the best case outcome is the military takes over, the theocrats are gone. And military juntas actually have a pretty solid tendency of turning into democracies. One example is Pinochet's regime, which is a terrible regime in many ways, but eventually it gave rise to a democratic government once again. And you've seen similar situations like that around the world. One example, again, is Taiwan, which was kind of a military junta. After the end of the Chinese Civil War, they ended up becoming a democratic regime. And in part, it's because there's no real ideology and there's not a clear succession structure. So if there's not a clear binding ideology that keeps everybody together and there's not a clear succession structure, your authoritarian regime is just not very robust.